Celiac disease affects 1 in 100 people globally. Most are undiagnosed, and there's still no approved treatment beyond a strict gluten-free diet. No cure at all. And yet, if you spend some time with researchers and clinicians in this field, you quickly realize something incredibly important. This is not a discovery problem, it's a delivery problem. For me, this became personal 5 years ago when my wife was diagnosed with celiac disease. You start to see how much of daily life is shaped by something that has no real path forward. I've spent my career working at the intersection of innovation and scale. And what I've learned is quite simple. Breakthroughs don't move on their own. They require infrastructure, capital, coordination, intent, and so much more. I'm honored to be working with the Celiac Disease Foundation as investment manager on a newly formed venture philanthropy impact fund vehicle. And I'm super honored to be here with two very special people. One is Marilyn. She leads the foundation, and she has been at the center of this work for decades. And she has some great stories and some great things to share. Brett Spitale, he brings a deep experience in venture philanthropy, helping people, but also translate that early science into real-world outcomes. He's done this before, and he too has a lot to share. This is a conversation about what happens when you take in a problem that's been overlooked for far too long and starting to treat it like it's solvable. Marilyn, what you've been leading for such a long time, I have to ask you this. What are people getting wrong about celiac disease, and why has it been undertreated and under-resourced for so long?
Thank you, Greg. And indeed, it's been since 2008 where our family's celiac journey began, when my son was diagnosed with celiac disease. About a year or two later, his father was then diagnosed. And last year, guess what? I was diagnosed.
Crazy.
So what are people getting wrong about celiac disease even today? The bottom line is that people just underestimate its severity and the prevalence. We talk about 1 in 100 people having it, but most are still undiagnosed, and there's still no approved treatment other than following a strict gluten-free diet, which is really difficult because gluten's in about 80% of our foodstuffs, and the amount of flour that could fit underneath your pinky fingernail is enough to have somebody with celiac disease have symptoms and even gut damage. Celiac disease, simply, it's not a dietary preference. It's a serious genetic autoimmune disease with serious long-term health consequences when unmanaged.
Why do you think? I mean, what's the uncomfortable truth here of why it's not treated?
Because the treatment is a gluten-free diet, our doctors, our patients have been told, go eat gluten-free.
Well said, well said. I mean, do you think if it were cancer or diabetes or something, would we still be here with no drug, nothing but a gluten-free diet?
So I think the real thing about cancer or diabetes is we as a society believe those to be and know those to be very serious diseases. Unless somebody is in what we would call celiac crisis, the fact that their celiac disease has gone untreated for a period of time that has made them completely malnourished. And I'll use my son as an example. In 2008, my son, who is an athlete, was so ill he could not get out of bed. He was so malnourished from not being able to absorb his nutrients that his body started to shut down. So if you were to see that, you would really understand the seriousness of the disease. But for the most part, people with celiac disease look like anybody else. They're struggling physically, they're struggling mentally with the disease, but because we don't see people in the hospital with tubes coming out of their body for the most part, we don't see people going into a diabetic coma, there's this perception that the disease isn't serious. However, there's more than 200 symptoms that people with celiac disease have. There is 4 times the greater risk of stomach cancer. There's twice the risk of heart disease. There's osteoporosis. There's infertility. I mean, there are very serious consequences. But the problem, again, is that when you look at somebody, they look like they're a normal person.
Yeah. I mean, it's so crazy to me, right? It also there's so many different factors and so many different things that it could be or be part of or tied in with, or right. So it gets confusing to someone that's trying to figure it all out. And I think that's the amazing thing about the work you've been doing for quite some time in the Celiac Disease Foundation. I mean, do you think that it's a science bottleneck or a system failure, or it's just untapped territory, like nobody knows? What do you think's really going on?
It's a system failure. The discoveries exist. What hasn't existed is the coordinated funding and infrastructure to translate them into treatments at scale. Simply, biopharma industry does not feel that the celiac population, can support, a big discovery with drug money, bottom line. And so there's not investment. What needs to happen is there needs to be bridge investment. Our role at the Celiac Disease Foundation is to convince biopharma that there is a population that deserves and wants a drug. But again, because the determination is that, it's not it's treatment right now that should have investment, it really requires people like the Celiac Disease Foundation, like our venture philanthropy fund, to be that bridge to help those smaller companies get to the point where they can have their proof of concept that this drug could work, and then bigger biopharma can be interested in acquiring those molecules, those treatments, those diagnostics to be able to bring them to scale.
It's so funny you say this because I think that's what brought me together with Brett and yourself originally, which was, I had this thought that was, hey, until we take a dollar and put that next to all of the incredible advocacy work that the Celiac Disease Foundation has already done, right? We're just not going to get the attention that celiac disease and this whole community really deserves. And that was kind of my foray into meeting both of you, really. And so, Brett, what's your take?
Yeah. So I mean, our story is a little bit different, but very similar, honestly. My son, who's 10 years old now, he was diagnosed with severe food allergies at the age of 2, and we had still, getting control of those food allergies, but still seeing something different, still seeing something wrong, and really, diagnosing ourselves and going to our pediatrician and saying, hey, we think this might be celiac disease and we want to get them tested for it. Without that advocacy piece and that education piece for ourselves, turning to the foundation, when we needed to, when I wasn't even working here, was key for us into, getting his diagnosis. Now, our situation was fortunate enough to where, he was probably spared from a lot of the effects of being, diagnosed at the age of 15, like Marilyn's son, but there's still some of those after effects that are there. And there's a lot of growing that goes on from the age of 0 to 3. We all know that. And then being able to try to get a hold of it after that, I think was, a difficult part for us as well, too. But through our particular journey, what we see is that, a lot of what Marilyn had said, sometimes the education just isn't there, both on the medical side and the general public. And we've said this several times before. Greg, you and I have had conversations about this. This is what brings us here today, is that there's a funding problem, and that's an issue. That's a real issue. And that's what this fund is here to do. We're here to disrupt the market with this and make sure that some of those novel technologies and some of those curatives that Marilyn was talking about that may be out there, why can't we step in and fund it? Why does it have to be NIH or why does it have to be private foundations? Why can't we as the Celiac Disease Foundation raise the funds, go in there, disrupt the market, and make sure that our community has access to what they need access to? And that's a cure. That's why we're here.
You talk about this fund. We're talking about the newly formed Celiac Disease Foundation Impact Fund, which is a venture philanthropy vehicle that really is working towards curative breakthroughs. And granted, we have a $15 million initial goal that we want to hit. But the reality is that's probably missing a few zeros to make the level of impact that we want to really make, right? But the fact is, with the expertise that we have, and Marilyn, I'd love you to talk to, who some of the people are that we have involved in this. But when you start to take this community, this thinking, this advocacy, all of the engine that the Celiac Disease Foundation has built to date, and then you bring them together to really deploy capital in the right places at the right times, I'm thinking we're going to make an impact. Marilyn, what's your thoughts?
Well, I mean, today, there's promising therapeutic candidates in diagnostics, treatment, prevention that have stalled, not because the science has failed, but because this early stage research hasn't attracted the capital needed to get it through development to the market. And, we could name companies right now, those of us who are close to it, that are going through this today. So Can the Celiac Disease Foundation spur investment to help bridge this? Something that our key opinion leader community has asked for. We are very fortunate if you go to the website of our celiacimpactfund.org that you will be able to see our science advisory group. The world's leaders in celiac disease research and drug development and diagnostics are actually advising us on these companies that have presented requests for funding to help us make certain that the monies go to the candidates that really will succeed.
Yeah, there's so much brain power on the scientific advisory group with their scientific advisory group. It's incredible to see that. And I think that's another part of what we bring to the table. The reputation of the Celiac Disease Foundation and all of the KOLs, the power of all the KOLs that we have. Again, I keep using the term disrupt the market, but that's really what we're here for. That's what we're here to do. Model is very, high risk, high reward. We realize that, but it's one of the best ways to move the needle towards a cure. And you can see that it's evident with other disease states that have been very successful in this route. And we've modeled it against those successful models that have worked. So we're fairly confident that this is going to move in the direction that it needs to move in. And we have the expertise here to be able to see it come to fruition.
Well, I'd like to add that, where this started was with the Celiac Disease Foundation's patient recruitment services. So we actually have a family of services that we provide for clinical trial development for celiac disease companies. And this is everything from helping them put together their key opinion leader advisory panels, running patient panels, protocol. We have software for screening all the way through retention at these sites. And this is a global initiative. So our goal initially was to provide a lower cost and a qualified patient quickly into trial for these companies so that they could preserve capital. But then it became clear that while that has been successful, and again, this model of getting to the most interested patient, we've proven the patients are there, the patients exist, the patients are in trial and they're staying in trial, but it wasn't enough. Helping the companies at the front end to get the patient into trial still didn't help them bridge the capital. So that piece of it was what really led to the discussions with our science advisory group, with our science study, where the SSCD, the Society for the Study of Celiac Disease, our scientific advisory society that is part of the foundation now. What could we do next? And what it really came down to was finding funding to help these trials go all the way to get them to where they needed to be so that they could launch into phase 3 and bring something to market.
It's interesting, right? So we're talking about the world of venture philanthropy and impact funding, but it's so interesting that like traditional venture hasn't stepped up to the plate in the way that maybe you would expect. Why do you think that is?
I think it's because it's a different model. This model is a little bit different. People make the investment. They make the investment to make an impact on the disease state, not a return on their investment. So it's a different in that way. And I think we do play a little bit in that VC piece as well, too, though, because people in the VC world are very involved with the fund. We need that expertise there. So there is some involvement on the side. We need investing advice, different things like that, and who can give us that better than folks that are existing in the VC world.
I think the reason I asked the question is because from the outside looking in, and even from the beginning when I got into this, I think this is one of the largest underfunded, broader than celiac, autoimmune kind of markets that's out there, right? It's even a larger conversation. No?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that not only is it underfunded, is there a funding issue here, but there's that level of interest as well too. So where do we go out and find that? I mean, as the leading organization, healthcare nonprofit organization in this space, we want to make sure that we're bringing those KOLs to the table and shining the light on this and bringing the interest towards it. So that's part of our job really as a foundation as well too. And part of the job of the fund as well. I mean, the brighter the spotlight, the more successful we're going to be.
Greg, I'd like to add, you hit on it's venture philanthropy. So the idea is exactly what Brett just said. People who are investing in this fund are doing so because celiac disease treatment, diagnostic, cure is near and dear to them. It is different from looking at any option you have to invest your money and what might bring you the biggest return. It is venture philanthropy. You are putting your money into something that is meaningful to you personally. And that's the biggest difference.
Have to applaud not only the work that Celiac Disease Foundation does on a daily basis, but it's also amazing that you've taken this leadership position to take the step into getting into venture philanthropy. Because quite frankly, I feel very strongly that this group is leading the way. And I know that because since the 30 days that we've been live, I've received more phone calls personally that has said, not only do I really like what you're doing and all of this, but I'd love to learn from you on how you could bring this to other places and how this could be ported over to other ways. So I just applaud the work that's being done, and I think it's a great opportunity not only to make an impact in the disease state, which is the most important thing, but also potentially lead the way in other disease states too.
Being a part of this fund, it's deeply personal. It is a community of people who share the same experience, whether having celiac disease themselves, whether a loved one has it, but it is a tight community, really deeply invested in the personal aspect of solving the problem of celiac disease, making sure that patients get real options beyond a lifelong restricted diet that is very difficult to follow, that there's earlier diagnosis, that there's better management of accidental exposure, and ultimately a treatment that will address the disease itself, not just its consequences. So again, venture philanthropy, putting your money into something that is deeply meaningful to you, that will move the needle for yourself and your loved ones.
Thank you. Let's talk about the types of things that we will do together. I'm asking you this question, but I'm in it with you. But what do you think we as a group are going to do when we talk about catalytic capital and how we're going to actually deploy capital, where we're going to put it, where we're going to focus? What are your kind of thoughts on our focus areas?
Well, I would say that we're looking at 3 areas. We are looking at diagnostics, we're looking at therapeutics, and of course, we're looking at prevention, and all 3 matter. Diagnostics, because as we've said before, most patients still remain undiagnosed. Therapeutics, because the gluten-free diet is not a treatment option that works well for most people. And obviously prevention, because the long-term vision's getting ahead of the disease entirely. So we will be looking at those 3 buckets across the spectrum of celiac disease.
So is the idea like super simple, i.e. invest where others won't and then they follow? Is that kind of the overall thinking here?
It's a little more specific than that, right? It's putting together the right investment leadership, credible governance structure, the clear thesis that these companies have to be able to perform, having the right science advisory group to really understand. Something can sound wonderful on paper, but not only the science behind it, but the team that's actually carrying it to market. Are they credible? Are they capable? So putting that all together, that's really what we are doing with this fund. We are bringing the right people together to make certain that companies that are worthy of investment, are the companies that are invested in.
How do you think early capital actually unlocks larger institutional funding and more participation from the overarching community?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the more investors, the more funding we have, the more we're able to start our investment journey. The more people look at what we're doing, the more people see the difference that we're making, and the more people want in on that. Success generates more success. And we build on top of that and continue to build on top of that. We have a lot of people that are invested in this right now, and a lot of people that want to see this work. And that's our job to be able to make it work. In order for us to do that, we have to go out there and use what the foundation has built up to this point and take that and springboard from there, moving in a bit of a different direction than what the foundation is right now, but taking that credibility and that market interest and turning it into capital for the fund. So we can take that, we can invest it, we can earn off our investments, and then reinvest it into the fund itself. So it continues to grow and grow and grow. And we're able to make a deeper and deeper impact with some of these novel technologies and curatives on the market.
So I want to add, one of the things with celiac disease is people come to us all the time and say, how can I volunteer? How can I make a difference? And we don't have a soup kitchen where you can go and serve meals to benefit, a community. It really is people bringing their advocacy and their dollars to the forefront. So we do have a strong advocacy program where people can be trained to be advocates for the disease. They can work with their state and the federal government to move initiatives. But for others, putting their own capital into an initiative to make certain that there's diagnostics, treatment, and eventually a cure is another way to achieve that path. So we really look at the venture fund for those who truly want to make a difference as a curated way to make sure that your dollars really speak and go into the best investment possible to achieve these goals.
I think, there's something so powerful about what this group is doing. It's it's heartbreaking that there's so many people dealing with this, but it's great to know that there is help on the way, right? That to me is very comforting, especially somebody who's dealing with it day in and day out myself. But I think when you look at the bigger picture of all of this, from what I've seen, it's not always that great science, fails because it's wrong. It fails because sometimes it never gets to market. And, when I see the amount of folks that work in this space, there is still a lot of people working on this, and yet they don't necessarily get the support that they need.
Are you asking if we've seen viable candidates fail because they couldn't attract investment to bridge them to the next
Very much
phase?
so. Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it happens more often than we think, and it's very unfortunate. You don't hear about it because it's gotten buried, but it happens more often than one would think.
What has to be true for one of these companies to actually scale, beyond funding?
You're asking other than investment in these companies? It's investment. It's funding, Greg. There's nothing more to it. I
I
mean, we
love it.
can help on the patient recruitment side to make certain that companies are designing a protocol that the treatment that they're offering or the diagnostic is something that's meaningful to patients. We can work with the payers on the other side to make sure that it'll be covered. But none of that exists without direct investment into these companies. So simply capital.
And I think that's the beauty of the fund because capital goes in,
Hmm.
those breakthroughs happen, the returns come back, and then they get redeployed. And we're looking at a flywheel effect that starts to happen over time, creating not only financial returns, but impact, 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 impact. And that is the biggest metric I think the fund is going to measure at the top of the list.
And again, I was going to say again, that goes back to the venture philanthropy model that the Celiac Disease Foundation is offering. Any return from these investments will go right back into the fund so we can expend more capital on other worthy companies.
What had to be true? Like, what? Because there were a lot of ducks to be in a row to pull this off. It seems so easy now, right? Looking 30 days back, but there was many months that I knew about, and then many before that, that you've been thinking about doing this. What had to be true to pull this off?
What had to be true was that we had the right structure, that we thoughtfully planned, that we thoughtfully recruited the right people to be involved, that we engaged the right legal counsel to make sure that our structures are beneficial for the investors. I mean, there's a lot of planning and strategic visioning that goes into setting up a venture philanthropy fund. So if you're asking, what those steps were, we just wanted to be very careful. And I'll say it again that we had the right investment leadership, we had the credible governance structure, that we had the clear thesis and that we had the support of the key opinion leader community and our investment community to do this.
I think you can start with the idea, right? I mean, it all starts with the idea of it. And you look at what's happening in other disease states and how successful it's been. I've had some past experience with this as well, too, as we mentioned at the top of the show. But I think it's the timing of everything is very important as well too. And this was just the time for this to happen, for us to do this, for us to be able to launch this. And I think that is a testament to what the foundation has been, how it's grown over the last 10 years, how it's been very innovative in looking at different things like patient recruitment for clinical trials. I mean, that was a huge part of the success of the foundation, and how it's pushed our trajectory onto a global scale. And I think all of those ducks needed to be in a row, so to speak, in order for us to be able to launch that. So there had to be a lot of success on the front end with the foundation in order to invest in this and say, okay, now's the time. Let's move.
I will add that, we've made a significant investment in public advocacy. in federal advocacy and global advocacy, working with our House Celiac Disease Caucus, working with Codex, which is the worldwide food labeling body. But what we realize is that, awareness and public understanding is not enough to move the science. We've spent years building the case that celiac disease is worthy of a treatment, of increased investment. And the Impact Fund is really the recognition that this advocacy has to be paired with capital strategy to actually change outcomes for patients.
When you think about the impact fund and the impact that it may just have, what do you think if we were to think ahead for the next few years? What do you think its impact may be on patients in the years ahead?
Well, the idea is that worthy candidates will actually cross the line and get to market. I mean, that's obviously the big goal. But at the same time, it shows the patient community that there is hope, and hope spurs change. And so if there's a message that there is a population that wants change, does not want just the gluten-free diet, which is ineffective and difficult to follow, and numerous studies have shown how poorly patients actually do on it, and that 90% plus patients want a treatment other than the gluten-free diet. This again is another vehicle to demonstrate that patients want a treatment. They want better diagnostics. They want investment. And ultimately, we hope that that will spur true venture capital, separate from venture philanthropy investment in these companies, bigger biopharma investment. But the idea is that this is a catalyst for that change.
It seems like now is the exact right time for this too. And so I'd like to just get like a lay of the land. Why now for the fund? Why now does this make so much sense?
Big biopharma is consolidating. If we don't help the smaller companies move their treatment, their diagnostic along, we will not end up with a treatment, period.
And I think that this is the right time. The foundation itself is in the right position as well too. This is something that an organization can't run into and just say we're going to start this fund because we want to start this fund because we've seen it work at other organizations. You have to be yourself in a very secure position and a very strong position. And again, I think over the last decade plus, that's what the foundation has really worked for, and it had a vision in mind of starting this fund, and the entire time they were moving this forward. So it's having the foundation position in the right place and a very strong place to do it as well too. Having the right relationships, knowing the right people, bringing the right people to the table.
And if we don't take matters into our own hands now, we the celiac community, we the celiac, therapeutic interested, there is a real risk that we will not have a treatment in the next 5 to 7 years. So the timing, it's imperative that people make this happen and invest now.
Yeah, our job, Marilyn, our job is to put ourselves out of work. That's why we're here. We know if we don't have a job, we've done what we've mission accomplished. And that you as well, Greg.
Yeah, definitely. I think when I look at this, I look at, the challenges and the daily life that my wife is going through. And I'm reminded of that on an hourly basis. And I think about it and I think, well, you know what? I don't care what we have to do. Let's go do it. Right. And I think that the reality is to be surrounded by so many people who are experiencing all of the same things, from young kids to adults and everywhere in between, from every walk of life. I mean, we've got to act, and we've got to act now. But I think the pieces of the puzzle that you've put in place before launching this fund is what makes this such an interesting moment in time. So yeah, for me, it's an exciting moment. It's also a daunting moment, but I think if we go and do it and we do it right, I think we could have a real impact. If there's anybody that's listening that might want to donate or get involved or just join us somehow, some way, what do you recommend?
I mean, first visit the website. It's celiacimpactfund.org. We want to make sure that that is out there, and we've gotten that out over the last 30 days with the launch of the fund. You can connect with myself, you can connect with you, Greg, connect with Marilyn in any way. Find all our contact information on the site. Learn more about it. The site is very informative, and we're more than willing to sit down and have the conversation with anyone that, one, wants to be involved, two, wants to donate to the fund, three, maybe even is looking to have the fund invest in what they have or what they want to do. So any and all, I would say visit the website and make sure that you reach out so we can have the conversation.
Excellent. I think that the fundamental interesting thing for me on this whole deal is it's and this is really where it gets interesting. Every dollar that goes in basically works twice in a way,
Mm.
right? Because you're bringing it into the fund, it's getting deployed into something, that return gets invested back into the fund, and it creates the impact that we're after. So for me, if someone is listening and is somehow tied to celiac, and remember, one in 100 people is, so your chances you probably know somebody. Unfortunately, the reality is, if they get involved in this fund, this is the way that they can have the probably the biggest impact of them all in the most direct way possible. What happens if we get this right?
You mean that there's actually going to be drugs to market? That there's going to be diagnostics that don't require biopsy or gluten challenge? That we prevent celiac disease before it happens so that patients have a life they deserve as opposed to one of fear of food, which is all encompassing? Greg, you tell me.
That sounds like a good reason to get involved in this fund, I'll tell you. Well said. Well said. Well, I have to say, I'm really honored that both of you took the time out of your super busy day to talk through this with us. The way I see it, the science has been waiting long enough. Now it's a question of whether the right capital shows up and how quickly we can make that happen. And I think it's on us to make it happen, because celiac disease by itself isn't going to solve itself, as we've seen. But this is how it gets solved. It's people taking this venture philanthropy kind of mindset and bringing it to the cause. And I really want to thank the Celiac Disease Foundation team alongside the Impact Fund leadership team, including William Thurston, Jordan Raymer, Blakely Braniff, John Wagner, and the scientific advisory group led by Dr. Robert Anderson with Dr. Leffler, Dr. Daniel Edelman, and Dr. Kieran Kelly. Most of all, thank you to Marilyn and Brett for all of your dedication and incredible advocacy and impact work you do on a daily basis. It truly is incredible. And before we go, I just want to say one last time, please go to celiacimpactfund.org to check out the site. You can learn lots more there. I'm grateful that we've worked together with Triple G to make all of this happen. And just really appreciate the opportunity to you both. And we're going to go make an impact. So thank you for listening and have a good day.